really. You see what I'm saying? That they're together to recharge their batteries and connect. They're all members of different Indian nations. They have to speak English together to communicate. They understand that they share certain commonalities. These commonalities are filtered through the experience of colonization and the language of English. So it's a very complex issue. If you ask me, how many indigenous psychologies are there for Native Americans? I wouldn't even
50 at least.
I wouldn't begin to know what to say. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you were to try to produce 550, how far would you get? They're having struggling just to create one.
Yeah.
And you know, in Aotearoa, I would say that in some ways, Māori indigenous psychology at this stage has probably more content to it than American Indian indigenous psychology, at least from what I saw in that conference. And it's because the resources are concentrated towards a single entity. All right? And you could argue, I mean, when I talk to Tūhoe, they won't accept this. They won't have bar. They say, I don't have any Māori tongue. I have Tūhoe tongue. Right? They'll say that. But the language they speak isn't that different from the language that Ngāi would speak, even though there may be dialectical differences. So what you see is that answer. That's why there's no answer to that first question. I'm really just highlighting that to you. It depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. What is it that you're trying to achieve? You know, with the people that we saw they were trying to be better clinicians primarily. They're trying to relieve suffering in a more sophisticated kind of way. Now that's actually quite a general mission. And if that's the general mission, then you can draw from a lot of different sources, as Kira was saying, drawing from mainstream clinical psychology, drawing from your spiritual traditions, et cetera, and not demarking so clearly. Because if you demark really clearly, this is Lakota psychology. Well, that's almost saying, how do you know for sure it doesn't also apply to Dakota? And how do you know that it doesn't apply to Blackfoot or Blackfeet, depending on if you're from Canada? I mean, literally it was like that. Some people call themselves Blackfoot and others call themselves Blackfeet. And again, that's a meaningful distinction, apparently. All right? So it's very complex. It is a project in the making. You're trying to achieve some end or achieve some goal. And I think that's what makes Māori indigenous psychology relatively coherent. Is that almost everyone shares this idea of decolonization, indigenous sovereignty, whakapapa, reclamation of language and traditions. All of these would be shared by almost everyone. And even though there's variability, there isn't so much variability that it can't be bound up together to create a whole. You see what I'm saying? And if you really did require a Tūhoe indigenous psychology and a Ngāi indigenous psychology, from my point of view, that would not serve this purpose.
The other thing is that most of us are multi-tribal, and we also are multi-ethnic in terms of the Pākehā of white blood that courses through our veins. Probably 90% of us, if not all of us, have some Pākehā ancestry. For Ngāi Tahu, it's the Irish Wales influence. Up north it's Dalmatian. There's a high degree of marriage between, is that what they call Dalmatian? Is people from Eastern Europe? Yeah. So there's a high degree of intermarriage between Ngāti Hine, which is one of the northern tribes, and the Dalmatian people who came over from Eastern Europe during the time of the gold, the gum digging, when they needed to, the Kōri gum. And then there's a high degree of intermarriage between Chinese people and Ngāti Maniapoto, so all through the Waikato area, I think it's the southern end of the Waikato tribal area, you'll find all these people with Chinese surnames because of the degree of intermarriage. But our position on that is that first and foremost, we can't relinquish our position as Tangawhenua, as the people of this land, as the land where our ancestors sailed from Hawaii to get to and establish themselves here. Because when we do that, then we become landless. Land is a fundamental part of this discussion about Indigenous psychology. And what happened in the United States was a relocation policy in the 1800s, where, for example, the Cherokee people were marched from San Diego across the United States, South Carolina, across the United States, and relocated on reservations in Oklahoma. And then some of them went from Oklahoma to, where was the young guy from, Chris, who was friends with Arama? There was a state over from Utah.
New Mexico?
No.
Arizona.
Anyway, so there's a pocket of Cherokee there. There's the bulk of Cherokee, those that survived, the descendants of those that survived, now living in Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma. And then there's still, a few of them, a minority, living in South Carolina. So that deliberate forced removal of American Indian people from their tribal homelands and relocation. What they did with the Hopi was they smacked bang and right down in the middle of Navajo territory. Now these are sworn enemies, the Navajo and the Hopi. And now you have intermarriage between Navajo and Hopi. And we had two with a Dr. Morris, who was she's a PhD clinical psychologist, confused, well not confused, but unsure in the company present. What do I declare first? Do I declare my Hopi? Do I declare my Navajo side first?
So this issue of how many Indigenous psychologists is really a politically fraught kind of decision, and it really is kind of constructed for political and knowledge-based reasons. So to give you another illustration, I was at this Asian mental health conference. Now the Asians are very interested in using the term Asian when dealing with the government. Why do you think that is?
With the New Zealand government,
Yes.
is that so that one particular Asian culture isn't singled out, but more of a general?
Yeah, it is.
Power in numbers.
Yes, power in numbers, okay? So they're very happy to do that because, you have this weird situation that Bridget talked about at the very beginning. We have a ministry for Maori affairs, ministry for Pacific affairs, and a ministry for everyone else. Did you know that? That's the structure of it. And essentially, so using that kind of strategy, I'm very interested as the Asians in Auckland, because they have the largest population. I think they're about 25 to 30% minority there. They want to use the Asian category to mobilize resources for mental health. Now, if they broke it up into Chinese, Indian, Korean, Filipino, which were the four biggest, you've just divided your numerical power by a quarter. So that is a political mobilization. Now, that's only for political purposes. There's no one who thinks that there is an Asian indigenous psychology, because Indians